Are you brave enough to try? Maya Johnson laughed nervously at her friend's teasing challenge as she sat across the dimly lit restaurant table, the scent of roasted garlic and warm bread mingling with the faint hum of background chatter, her eyes flicking toward the figure in the corner, a man whose presence seemed to command the entire room without a word, his posture straight and deliberate, dark-tailored suit perfectly fitted. His hair slicked back and eyes scanning the room with a quiet intensity, and as she leaned slightly forward, feeling a mix of curiosity and a flutter of nerves, her friends egging her on with playful grins and whispered encouragements, she found herself saying yes, sliding out of her chair and cautiously stepping toward the imposing figure, her heels clicking softly against the polished wood floor, and with each step, she could feel the attention of nearby diners shift, a subtle tension in the air as if the room itself had noticed. She reached the man and, with a hesitant smile and a quick glance at her friends, gently perched herself on the edge of his chair, the warmth of his presence immediately noticeable, a quiet strength radiating from him that made her heart beat a little faster. He looked down at her, one eyebrow slightly raised, a small, amused curve to his lips, and despite the unexpectedness of the moment, a connection sparked, silent yet undeniable, words unspoken but felt deeply. She could sense a calm confidence emanating from him, the kind that suggested he was used to people noticing him, and she realized this simple, daring action had shifted the dynamic of the evening entirely, her mind racing with possibilities as she tried to match his steady, attentive gaze, the noise of the restaurant fading into background, the world shrinking to just the two of them, a shared glance loaded with curiosity, intrigue, and a hint of unspoken understanding, her pulse quickening not from fear but from the thrill of the unknown, knowing that this encounter, born from a playful dare, would mark the beginning of a story far beyond an ordinary night out, one that would weave together moments of tension, subtle glances, and unexpected revelations. Maya felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension, realizing that sometimes the smallest acts of spontaneity could ignite something unforgettable. As the man slowly extended his hand, a gesture simple yet commanding, welcoming her into the orbit of a world she had only glimpsed in passing, the restaurant lights catching in his dark eyes, reflecting a depth of character and authority, and in that instant, Maya understood that this daring choice, made with a mixture of laughter and nerves, had opened a door to a narrative neither of them could have anticipated. A story that would unfold with unexpected twists, personal revelations, and moments that challenged her perceptions of power, intrigue, and connection, leaving her simultaneously exhilarated and curious for what would come next. Every detail of the restaurant, the ambient music, and the subtle shifts in attention around them contributing to a charged atmosphere that felt both intimate and significant. And as she settled slightly more comfortably, the playful challenge having led her to this intense yet strangely comforting interaction, Maya's mind was already racing with thoughts, questions, and the anticipation of discovering more about the enigmatic man before her, knowing that the night had only just begun and that this chance encounter might very well change everything she thought she knew about daring, attraction, and the unexpected paths life could take in a single moment. The moment I stood up from his chair, the restaurant seemed to remember how to breathe again. Conversations slowly returned. Glasses clinked. Soft music drifted through the air. Yet none of it sounded quite the same. I could still feel his eyes following me as I crossed the room toward my friends. The second I sat down, they exploded into barely controlled laughter. "Maya, I cannot believe you actually did it," one of them whispered. Another covered her mouth. "Did you see his face?" I tried to laugh with them, but my attention kept drifting back toward the corner table. The man remained exactly where he had been. Calm, composed, unbothered. Unlike me, my heart was still racing. "Relax," I told myself as I reached for my water glass. "You sat in a stranger's chair for 10 seconds. The world is not ending." Yet something felt different. The evening moved on, but my focus never fully returned. Every few minutes I found myself glancing across the room. Sometimes he was looking at a document. Sometimes speaking quietly with another man seated nearby. Sometimes simply watching the restaurant around him with the same calm authority that seemed completely natural to him. Nearly an hour later, my friends began gathering their coats. The dinner was ending. Outside the windows, Manhattan shimmered beneath thousands of lights. Snow had started falling again, dusting the sidewalks in white. I was reaching for my purse when a waiter suddenly appeared beside our table. "Miss Johnson," he asked politely. My stomach tightened. Yes. He handed me a small folded card. This was left for you. My friends immediately leaned closer. I stared at the card for a second before opening it. Inside was a single sentence written in elegant handwriting. Most people spend their lives avoiding uncomfortable moments. You walk directly into one. I smiled before I could stop myself. Beneath the sentence was a phone number. Nothing else. No name. No explanation. My friends erupted into excited whispers while I quickly folded the card and slipped it into my purse. Absolutely not, I said, shaking my head. There is no chance I am calling that number. They laughed because none of them believed me. The truth was that I did not believe myself either. 20 minutes later I stepped outside into the cold winter air. Snowflakes drifted beneath the streetlights. Yellow taxis moved through the city. The restaurant door closed behind me, and for a moment I simply stood there, breathing in the cold. Then a black luxury sedan pulled away from the curb across the street. As it passed beneath a street lamp, I caught a glimpse of him through the tinted window. His gaze met mine for less than a second. Then the car disappeared into traffic. I should have forgotten about him. I should have gone home and laughed about the ridiculous dare with my friends. Instead, as I climbed into a rideshare and watched the city lights blur outside the window, my hand slipped into my purse and found the folded card again. And for the first time that night, I realized I did not want to know who he was. I wanted to know why he seemed to already know something about me. The next morning arrived wrapped in pale winter sunlight, but my mind was still somewhere between the restaurant, the handwritten note, and the stranger whose presence refused to leave my thoughts. I stood beside the large window of my Brooklyn apartment, coffee warming my hands as snow drifted slowly between the buildings outside. The city was already awake. Delivery trucks rumbled below. People hurried along the sidewalks. Life moved forward. Mine seemed strangely paused. The folded card remained on my kitchen counter exactly where I had left it the night before. I had promised myself I would throw it away. Instead, I had read the message at least 20 times. Most people spend their lives avoiding uncomfortable moments. You walk directly into one. I smiled despite myself. There was something unsettling about how accurately that described me. By 9 o'clock, I was seated at my desk inside the design agency where I worked. Large monitors glowed around me. Creative briefs covered half my workspace. My coworkers chatted about deadlines and holiday plans. Normally, I loved this environment. Creating things made sense to me. Colors made sense. Typography made sense. Clients rarely did, but even they followed patterns eventually. What did not make sense was why a man I had spoken to for less than a minute occupied so much space inside my thoughts. Around noon, my best friend Chloe appeared beside my desk carrying 2 coffees. She placed one in front of me and immediately narrowed her eyes. You are thinking about him again. I nearly dropped my pen. I am not. Maya. Fine, I admitted. Maybe a little. Chloe grinned victoriously. Did you call? No, text. No, search his number? I hesitated. Her smile widened. You searched his number. I groaned and buried my face in my hands. The truth was embarrassing. At 2 o'clock that morning I had entered the number online. Nothing. No name. No social media profiles. No business listing. Nothing existed. It was as if the number belonged to a ghost. That is either incredibly romantic or slightly terrifying, Chloe said. I have not decided which. Neither had I. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of meetings and client revisions. By 6 o'clock, darkness had settled across the city once again. I packed my bag and headed toward the subway station. Snowflakes drifted through the air as I walked. Halfway down the block, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. I froze instantly. For a moment, I simply stared at the screen. My pulse accelerated. The message contained only one sentence. I hope your presentation went well today. Every sound around me seemed to disappear. The presentation. I had presented a campaign to a client at 3 o'clock. Only people inside the office knew about it. 100 questions exploded inside my head. Before I could decide whether to respond, another message appeared. Relax. I asked the restaurant manager about you. Nothing more. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I found myself smiling beneath the falling snow. Then my phone vibrated one final time. Would you like to have coffee tomorrow, Maya? And standing there beneath the city lights, watching snow settle onto the screen, I realized my answer had already begun forming long before the question arrived. I spent the entire night convincing myself that I should say no. By morning, I had somehow convinced myself to say yes. The realization arrived while I stood in front of my apartment mirror, changing outfits for the third time and silently questioning every decision that had led me here. Outside, fresh snow covered the sidewalks of Brooklyn in a thin white layer. Inside, my phone rested on the bathroom counter with a simple conversation displayed on the screen. One message. One invitation. One answer. Coffee sounds harmless enough, Chloe had texted earlier. Famous last words, I had replied. By noon, I was walking toward a small cafe on the Upper East Side. The location surprised me. I had expected somewhere extravagant. Instead, it was quiet and elegant, tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop. The kind of place people discovered accidentally and then never forgot. The moment I stepped inside, I saw him. He was already there, seated near a window overlooking the street. Sunlight reflected softly against the glass behind him. He wore a charcoal coat over a dark sweater, looking less intimidating than he had at the restaurant, and somehow even more interesting because of it. When he noticed me, he stood immediately. The gesture was simple, respectful, unexpected. Maya. The way he said my name made it sound familiar. You actually came, he added. I laughed lightly as I sat down. You sound surprised. I was prepared for the possibility that you would block my number. I considered it. His smile appeared slowly. Fair. A server arrived with coffee menus, but neither of us looked at them immediately. For a moment we simply studied each other. It felt strange and comfortable at the same time, like recognizing someone from a dream you could not fully remember. I should probably know your name if we are having coffee, I finally said. Lorenzo Russo. The name sounded expensive, powerful, familiar somehow, yet I could not place it. Nice to officially meet you, Lorenzo. Likewise. The conversation unfolded more naturally than I expected. We talked about New York, about work, about favorite neighborhoods and childhood memories. He listened carefully whenever I spoke, paying attention in a way that felt increasingly rare. Most people waited for their turn to talk. Lorenzo actually listened. At one point, I found myself describing a failed design project from years ago, a story I normally would not share. Yet somehow it felt easy, safe. He seemed genuinely interested. You care about your work, he observed. That is unusual. Most people care about their work. No, he said quietly. Most people care about success. You care about creating something meaningful. The comment caught me off guard because it was true. More true than I usually admitted. Outside the cafe window, snow continued falling. Inside, time seemed to move differently. Hours passed without either of us noticing. Eventually, his phone buzzed on the table. For the first time all afternoon, his expression changed. Only slightly, but enough for me to notice. He glanced at the screen and immediately locked it. Everything okay? I asked. Just business. There was something final in the way he said it. Not rude. Just closed. Like a door quietly shutting. A few minutes later, our conversation resumed, but curiosity had already planted itself inside my mind. Because for the first time since meeting him, I realized there were entire parts of Lorenzo Russo that he was choosing not to show me. And somehow, that only made me want to know more. The evening air was crisp as Maya stepped out of the cab, her coat tightly wrapped and her breath forming little clouds in front of her. The city lights reflected off the wet pavement, giving the streets a soft, golden glow. She checked her watch, realizing she was early, and decided to walk a few blocks, allowing herself a moment to think, to prepare, and to remember why she had agreed to this meeting. Lorenzo had texted a single word earlier. Wait, which somehow felt both commanding and casual, and she could not help but wonder what exactly she was waiting for. As she approached the corner of a quiet street lined with small boutiques and cafes, she noticed a familiar sleek black car slowly pulling up, its engine barely audible, and a presence that immediately commanded the space around it. Lorenzo stepped out, adjusting his dark overcoat, his posture impeccable, and his gaze scanning the surroundings before settling on her. There was no hurry in his movements, only a calculated confidence that made her pulse quicken. He approached with a measured stride, his eyes holding an unreadable expression that flickered briefly into a hint of amusement. "You walked here," he observed, his voice calm but carrying weight, and she nodded, unable to find her own voice immediately, feeling the unusual tension of both curiosity and restraint. "Yes," she finally said. "I wanted a moment to think." He raised an eyebrow but did not comment further, instead opening the car door and gesturing for her to enter. The interior was luxurious yet understated, and the warmth of the leather seats contrasted with the chilly air outside. As they drove through the softly lit streets, conversation flowed effortlessly, but each word seemed layered with intention, each pause deliberate. They discussed mundane things at first, coffee preferences, favorite neighborhoods, the peculiar charm of late-night diners, but beneath the surface, every glance, every shift of the body suggested that there was more to be revealed. Maya found herself laughing genuinely, a sound she had not heard in a long time, and Lorenzo's rare smile was directed entirely at her. A subtle but powerful connection that seemed to bridge the distance of past encounters and present moments. The car stopped outside a small, private gallery, and he turned to her, his expression serious yet inviting. "Shall we?" he asked, and as they walked inside together, she felt the unusual certainty that despite the casual setting, this evening would mark a turning point, a quiet revelation that neither of them would forget, each step echoing in the gallery as if announcing the beginning of something both delicate and intense, the kind of moment that lingers in memory long after the night ends. The gallery felt almost empty as Maya and Lorenzo moved from one exhibit to another, the soft lighting casting shadows that danced across the walls and floor, heightening the quiet intimacy of the space. Lorenzo paused in front of a large abstract painting, his expression unreadable, and Maya felt the tension of anticipation, the sense that every detail mattered, every gesture carried unspoken meaning, and she instinctively stepped closer, matching his pace, her fingers brushing lightly against her coat as they walked, sharing the silence that seemed to pulse with possibility. He turned to her with a slight smile, commenting on the colors and shapes, and she responded thoughtfully, noticing the care in his words, the way he seemed to observe not only the art but her reactions, as if trying to understand both at the same time. They continued through the gallery, occasionally stopping to discuss a piece, their conversation weaving between light-hearted observations and deeper, more personal reflections, creating a rhythm that felt both familiar and electric, and Maya found herself laughing softly at a witticism, the sound echoing in the high-ceilinged room, drawing Lorenzo's gaze and a rare, approving nod that made her heart flutter. As they approached a secluded corner with a smaller collection, Lorenzo's tone shifted slightly, more serious now, and he asked her opinion on a piece that seemed to capture movement and tension, mirroring perhaps the unspoken emotions between them. Maya studied the painting, feeling the rush of memories and current emotions mingling, and as she spoke, she realized how safe and yet alert she felt in his presence, the combination of trust and excitement that was impossible to ignore. They lingered longer than they had planned, discussing art, life, and choices, each word carrying subtle layers, the evening outside turning darker, but the interior warmth and the gentle hum of their interaction creating a cocoon around them. Finally, Lorenzo suggested a break, leading her to a small seating area where they could rest and enjoy tea, and as they sat across from each other, the contrast between the gallery's grand art and the quiet intimacy of the corner made the moment feel almost cinematic, a pause in time where connection was tangible and yet so fragile, a careful balance between curiosity and restraint, and Maya realized that every detail of this encounter mattered, from gestures to glances, and that this night would linger in her thoughts, a chapter of subtle revelation and growing anticipation for what might follow in their intertwined lives. The soft glow of the city lights spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting the penthouse in hues of gold and deep blue, and as Maya stepped closer to the balcony, she could feel the crisp night air brushing against her cheeks, her thoughts a whirl of anticipation and uncertainty. Lorenzo stood behind her, his presence commanding yet surprisingly gentle, and she could sense his attention on her, the subtle shift in his posture speaking volumes, an unspoken invitation to share the view and the moment, and she allowed herself a small smile, acknowledging the tension that had been building since their last encounter, the kind of tension that held a mix of curiosity, caution, and undeniable intrigue. They spoke in low tones, exchanging reflections on the evening, the cityscape, and personal memories, each word weighted with significance, and Maya realized how easy it was to be herself in his presence, yet how careful she had to be with every glance, every gesture, understanding that their dynamic carried both connection and mystery. A car passed on the street below, its headlights briefly illuminating the room, and she noticed Lorenzo's eyes follow it, his expression thoughtful, almost reflective, and she wondered what memories or plans flickered behind that composed exterior, knowing that every moment with him was layered with hidden depths and intentions. As they moved to the seating area near the window, the soft hum of the city providing a soundtrack, Lorenzo poured 2 glasses of wine and handed one to Maya, the smooth motion reinforcing the unspoken trust and awareness between them, and she took it, their fingers brushing ever so slightly. A spark of contact that drew a flush to her cheeks, making the conversation feel more intimate, more charged, yet entirely safe within the context of mutual understanding. They leaned back, sipping the wine, and discussed art, literature, and the unexpected twists of life, their dialogue a delicate balance of light-hearted banter and meaningful revelations, each laugh and shared glance building a rhythm that was both familiar and thrilling, the kind that leaves one suspended between comfort and exhilaration. And Maya realized she was fully present in the moment, absorbed by the layered experience of presence, perception, and anticipation. As the night deepened, they gazed out over the twinkling skyline, a quiet pause enveloping them, the city's pulse echoing the unspoken rhythm between their hearts, and Maya understood that this evening was a turning point, a delicate weaving of trust, intrigue, and emotional resonance, and that the journey ahead with Lorenzo would be one where every gesture and word mattered, a careful choreography of connection, discovery, and the magnetic pull of dark romance unfolding slowly, compellingly, and irrevocably. The room was bathed in the warm glow of candlelight, casting long shadows that danced across the walls as Maya and Lorenzo stood near the grand piano, the soft notes from a distant street musician mingling with the crackle of the fireplace, creating a sense of intimacy and anticipation. Maya glanced at Lorenzo, noticing the intensity in his eyes, the slight arch of his brow, and the quiet strength that seemed to radiate from him, and she felt a mixture of curiosity and cautious excitement, understanding that each moment with him carried weight and meaning beyond words. Lorenzo offered her a chair, gesturing with a calm authority, and as she sat, the subtle closeness between them made the air feel charged, every movement deliberate, every glance layered with intention, and Maya sensed the careful balance between trust and intrigue that defined their connection, a dance of understanding and subtle power. As they conversed, the conversation flowed effortlessly, alternating between light-hearted teasing and deep reflections on their shared history, the sound of their laughter mingling with the quiet hum of the city outside, creating a rhythm that was both familiar and exhilarating, and she realized how much she had missed this dynamic, the playful tension, the unspoken understanding that only they could share. A gentle breeze drifted through the slightly open window, carrying with it the scent of winter air and the faint aroma of nearby bakery treats, and Maya felt the scene around her heighten the sensory experience, the soft rustle of curtains, the distant murmur of conversations from the streets below, all adding to the immersive moment between them, making the evening feel both private and expansive, a bubble of connection in a bustling world. Lorenzo reached for a glass of wine, offering it with a subtle gesture that conveyed respect and care, and as Maya accepted, their fingers touched briefly, sending a shiver of awareness through her, a reminder of the delicate line between comfort and intensity that defined their interactions, and she knew that each shared glance, each subtle movement, was a step deeper into a narrative filled with intrigue, emotional resonance, and the compelling allure of dark romance, an evolving story of connection, anticipation, and the magnetic pull that drew them ever closer in the quiet, candlelit room, suspended in time and emotion. The snow had stopped sometime after midnight, leaving the city wrapped in a quiet stillness that felt almost unreal, and as Maya stood beside the tall window watching the lights shimmer across the skyline, she realized how completely her life had changed in such a short time, not because of some dramatic event, but because of a series of small choices that had led her here, to this moment, to this man, and to a future she had never imagined. Lorenzo remained near the fireplace, his posture relaxed for perhaps the first time since she had met him, the sharp edges of his carefully controlled world softened by the warmth of the evening, and when their eyes met across the room, neither of them looked away. For a long moment there was only silence, comfortable and meaningful, the kind that exists between two people who have stopped pretending they are strangers. Maya slowly crossed the room and settled into the chair opposite him, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea, and she smiled softly as she remembered the ridiculous dare that had started everything, the laughter of her friends, the nervous rush of courage, the unexpected glance from a man she knew nothing about. Lorenzo seemed to read her thoughts because a rare smile appeared on his face. "You are thinking about that night," he said quietly. She laughed. "I still cannot believe I actually did it." "Neither can I," he admitted, and the honesty in his voice made her smile grow wider. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm, but inside the penthouse time seemed to slow, allowing every detail to settle into memory. After a few moments, Lorenzo stood and walked toward a nearby table, returning with a small black folder that he placed between them. Maya looked at it curiously. "What is this?" she asked. Lorenzo sat down again and folded his hands. "The truth," he answered. She opened the folder slowly, expecting contracts or business documents, but instead she found articles, photographs, and information connected to him, information that explained why his name had felt familiar from the beginning. Her eyes moved across the pages until she finally looked up at him. "You are one of the most powerful men in New York," she said quietly. Lorenzo nodded once. Among other things, surprisingly, she did not feel frightened. Perhaps she should have, but the man sitting in front of her was no longer a mystery built from assumptions. He was the same person who had listened to her stories, challenged her thoughts, remembered small details, and treated her with patience and respect. The title attached to his name suddenly seemed less important than the person behind it. Lorenzo studied her carefully. "You are not asking the question everyone usually asks." Maya tilted her head. "Which question?" "Whether you should stay away from me." She considered it for a moment before smiling. "If I was going to run away, I probably would have done it weeks ago." For the first time, genuine relief appeared in his expression. The tension that had quietly followed them seemed to dissolve into the warm glow of the room. They spent the rest of the evening talking about possibilities instead of secrets, about hopes instead of doubts, and as dawn slowly began to brighten the horizon beyond the glass, Maya understood something her mother had once told her years ago, that sometimes the biggest changes in life begin with a single unexpected moment, and sometimes the people who seem impossible to understand become the ones who finally make you feel understood.